technology. And I'm sure all of you are enjoying the various sessions in the conference. And we have very eminent speakers coming from different talks sharing their perspective. To begin with our track 3, emerging business model, the key role of HR in accelerating businesses, I would like to welcome Captain Raghu Raman, founding CEO, NatGrid, and ex-president Reliance Industry, as a keynote speaker for this session. As we all know, Captain Raghu has been enabling organizational dynamics, strategy, transformations, and the mindset shift that is needed to lead in a complex and ever-changing world. So over to you, Captain. We are all ears.
Thank you, Dev. Thanks a ton. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Fantastic. So since the topic I wanted to talk to you about was on the inefficiency that creeps into organizations when they are stressed, I'm sure many of you may have heard this statement that C language was written in C language. The C language programming language was actually written in itself. So in this session, I think serendipity decided that before we could begin the session, there would be a certain amount of stress. You know, there'd be, the system is not working. There's no, which is normal. This is what is happening in real life. So despite all care taken and rehearsals done and all of that, the road rage in digital space seems to follow us. It seems to come with us. So great. What I'll do is I'll use this presentation to sort of illustrate some of the points that I wanted to make. And I'm assuming you can see this slide in front of you, because I can't now see myself, or the I can see the slide. Can you see this?
Yes, I can see, Captain.
Great. And as the line there says that stress is hitting the bottom line. And let me explain to you why I'm saying this. And by the way, whatever I'm discussing with you now has very little to do with COVID. It has perhaps been accelerated by COVID, but it's not like corporate India or the employees of corporate India were in a really nice, happy place before COVID happened. A lot of that stress was already in place. But somehow, I think, ironically, financial leaders who are responsible for the P&L, I've been one of them, equally guilty, who know that, yes, my teams are under stress and my teams are going through, one, as Mahalakshmi just pointed out before, we are speaking from one sprint to another sprint, but still not perhaps cognizant of the fact that that is having adverse effect on the bottom line. And I'm not talking a touchy-feely good that I want my people to be happy. No, not at all. I'm saying with a brutal focus on performance of the quarterly performance, it is having a very, very deep impact. And hopefully over the next 10-15 minutes, I want to show you some data which will convince you that this is an area that organizations will need to look at very, very focused. And let me start with this story. And this is a old riddle, children's riddle, and I'm sure you would have heard about it at some point of time. It's not doing the rounds in WhatsApp nowadays, so it may still be new for you. So the story goes something like this, that there is the ship which you can see, which is on the harbor, and it has a ladder coming down for the people to climb up into the ship. And in this harbor, the tide goes down 1 hour. Every hour, 1 feet of the tide goes down. So the hourly decrease, receding of the tide is per hour 1 feet down. So the question that would be asked is, if the rungs of the ladder are spaced apart 1 foot each, then in how many hours will 3 rungs of the ladder be uncovered? As the tide recedes at 1 foot an hour, rung distance between each other is 1 foot. So how many hours will it take for 3 rungs of the ladder to be uncovered by the receding tide? And of course, the intuitive answer would be 3 hours, but it would be wrong. And the reason it's wrong is when the tide recedes, the entire ship also goes down with it. So as far as the ladder is concerned, the relationship of the ladder to the sea level remains exactly the same. So if leaders were to look at the ladder to gauge how low their organization has come down because of stress, inefficiencies, cramped working environments, lack of social interaction, and check the ladder, which is what usually most organizations do. These ladders in organizations are called Gallup surveys, employee survey, feedback, how many programs we are doing and all of that stuff. It may be a little misleading. And let me show you some of the reasons why. Because firstly, mental health was a very big challenge well before COVID. It was actually, interestingly, in 2001 or 2002, WHO predicted that the mental health, specifically depression, would be the number one cause, the biggest cause of the medical burden of most countries. Actually, globally, they predicted. They were wrong, because this target was achieved in 2020. We achieved it last year. Last year, depression overtook cancer, diabetes, asthma, every other disease to become the number one global disease burden, and by extension, the most the drain on efficiency of an employee. Because interestingly, most organizations can and do screen their employees for 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, 2 is more of a road accident, but we still put in claims to prevent, and we have protocols that all 2 riders will have to wear helmets and all of that stuff. We measure this at the point of entry, and we measure it regularly every year. But when it comes to the most debilitating of all these 5, it is not even, it's just begun to be talked about now. Now is when we are having these conversations about mental health. And barring a few organizations which are probably much more progressive, or probably much smaller in numbers, or probably populated by knowledge workers, most other organizations are paying what is largely called lip service to it. And I have proof for it. I'll tell you the proof. This session that I'm doing right now has appeared as an op-ed piece today morning in Hindustan Times. So those of you who want to read the printed version of it can read it. I tweeted it last night. And when I tweeted it last night, you should go and take a look at the tweets, at the comments. The comments are from employees. The comments are mostly from employees, where they say that our organizations make a lot of lip service to this, but they actually don't do anything on the ground. So I think that's the first point that we need to know. But interestingly, well before all of this happened, in 2004, there was, 2014, there was a survey done by Gallup, worldwide survey. More than a few thousand organizations were tested, and the results were pretty startling, because what it said was that in most organizations, less than 20% of the people are actively engaged, emotionally, mentally, passionately engaged. 60% are neutral. They look at the clock, they look at the chartered bus, and they figure out how much stuff I can do or not do to get till the 5 o'clock slot. And actually, about 20% are actively sabotaging the organization because they feel so resentful. So in any case, our 100cc engine was running only at 20cc even to begin with. Okay, some organizations may have been more, some may have been less. This is obviously a averaged out number. But fact is that we know intuitively. I mean, I have led 9 organizations, and I know that barring some spurts or barring some mission mode projects, in most organizations, there is a lot of engagement energy of the employees that is actually wasted away. It is not channeled towards the mission. It's wasted away in so many other areas, and we all know what those areas are. Now, I believe, and this comes from my experience of working in organizations, watching organizations as a fly on the wall, and very interestingly, I've spent about, 38 years now in the space of fundamentally managing risk, security, building teams, and stuff like that. And very often I'm asked this question, that what do you think will be the biggest risk for large organizations in the future? And people expect my answer would be like terrorism, or some sort of a explosion, or cyber security and all of that. I don't think so. I have gone through, I've lived through several crises. I haven't seen 2611 take out any business. Taj came out much stronger. Oberoi came out much stronger. I haven't seen cybersecurity take down an organization's entity. Even 9/11, for God's sake, did not take down any one of the businesses that were there in the World Trade Center. But what will take us down is probably the fact that we are slowly becoming weaker and weaker. And let me show you that with a couple of examples. Because firstly, this challenge of mental health is I think, not very well understood in corporates even now. The role model of that, alpha CEO who is the hard rock and who will have the answers to all the problems, who stands like a rock in a storm, that's the idealism. If somebody were to talk about depression, talk about stress, I'm not very sure that I think they would be more east out of the organization than east out of the problem that they're facing. The second part, as I said, that because there is a lack of understanding. So, for example, many of us would have heard that 1 in 5 people go through stress, 1 in 5. What we don't know is that this 1 in 5 is a round robin. All of those 5 at some point of time, stress, anxiety, depression is like viral fever. All of us will get it. And we'll get it with varying degrees of damages. So it's not like it's 1 in 5. It's not like it's only 20% of the organization. It is 20% of the organization in best case condition at a time. But every individual will have some sort of an experience which will affect that individual to some degree. And I think also, if we truly ask ourselves, in most organizations, even now, our methods of measurements are very industrial age. It's physical presence. You log on, you log on with your face. Of course, it's modern technology, so it's all facial recognition and it's the smart chip and all of that stuff. But essentially, it's physical presence being measured. It is not mental or emotional engagement being measured. And really, there is no structured mechanism apart from that annual review or this 360 feedback and all of that. Whose efficacy, these instruments' efficacy, we all know how efficient these instruments are and how much we can really trust what they tell us. I want to bring this point out that virtually for every aspect that you see in these 5 points, other than depression, I mean the 4 aspects, organizations have put through a very structured approach. Not just organization, the world has. When you go for a medical checkup, everything happens in your body. Even an MRI can be taken of your brain, provided they're looking for physical damage. But when they're looking for emotional state or the damage to the mind in terms of morale, in terms of anxiety, there is really no measurement. There is maybe a 20-minute counseling session that happens once in 365 days in a year. So we really need to think that aspect through. Coming to this particular instance of the last 12 months, we all know that the working conditions have changed dramatically. And I say this with a little bit of, I hope I'll be forgiven for saying this, that most of the people who are in this webinar right now, most of us, fortunately, won the lottery of life and came to a position where we have the facility and the wherewithal to perhaps even have a private space where we can do webinars such as this, conversations. So I'll tell you an interesting story. A friend of mine, a very dear friend of mine who is a CEO, in the month of June, wanted to address all his employees on a Zoom call at 8 o'clock in the evening to talk about empathy. Now, he perhaps forgot that employees of his who especially live in Bombay, in places like Bombay, would probably have to send their wife and kids out of the house to the neighbor's house or to the corridor so that they could do this call, because they probably forget that the laptop that the companies issued to them is also the laptop on which 2 children are attending their school and doing many other things. So in these constrained environments, where if you put ourselves into the shoe of an employee who's probably lost a near loved one, maybe by 1 degree of separation or less, has been severely constrained, has not been able to meet her friends or her social friends, her work friends, is still expected to deliver the same results, that same targets, in some cases higher targets than were set for the year last year. We also see many social indicators of stability, whether they are divorce cases, breaking relationships, suicide, especially amongst the younger people, financial distress, uncertainty. All of them are plummeting. The statistics are alarmingly plummeting, and yet we expect that when this employee will log on, somehow the person will be, positive minded and mindfulness and a positive state of mind and all of that. And I often find this as an irony, as we were discussing the backstage, that we expect an employee who comes in to the campus. I used to work in Reliance, where we had 45,000 people coming in into the campus every day. And our expectation is that an employee who's just been involved in a road rage outside the campus, as soon as they enter the campus, they will become an empathetic team player, because it says so on the board of the values of the company. So I really think we need to take a relook at the expectations that we have of our troops, because I've been in the army and I can tell you this, that troops are a finite resource. Morale is a finite resource. Mojo that we wake up in the morning with is a finite resource. And these resources get whittled away with every instance of anxiety, every instance of anxiousness that happens to us on a daily basis. And by the way, a certain amount of this mojo is already taken away with this sword hanging over certain organizations' head, that there will be headcount cuts, there will be optimization, there will be efficiencies. Some organizations even went as far as to cut the pay when the organization itself was doing very well during that point of time. So very clearly, we cannot, no body of troops, no commander of troops. There is a very famous story by Sun Tzu, by the way. It's a not very well-known story. You will not find it in the abridged versions, but you will find it in the full text, where Sun Tzu once talks about a very good general. And he says what the emperor thinks of that general. So he says, he names the general, some Chinese name, and he says, General Sun Tseng, whatever, is a great warrior. He knows no pain, he knows no fear, and he knows no hunger. And that is why I never give him troops to command, because troops know fear, troops know pain, and troops know hunger. We need to know that this is a very finite resource that we are working with. This was actually a story told to me by a former colleague of mine, a very good friend, Prasanna Karthik. And he said that when he speaks to most people these days, the common refrain that they hear is, we are taking one day at a time, living day by day, day by day. And it seemed very familiar to me, because I've also said this to many people and heard many people say this. Can you imagine the implications for a corporate if the head of R&D or the head of strategy or any strategic leader for that matter gets into the mindset of thinking one day at a time? Can you imagine what will happen to entire industries like insurance or specialist studies, where you're required to study for 10 to 12 years before you find a job in that sphere, or a major infrastructure project, if the mindset of the potential workforce is going to become one day at a time? Let's take life one day at a time. Think about policies like climate change. What will happen if the mindset becomes, we will take things one day at a time? It's a very, so this innocuous pop psychology good advice may be good advice as a phrase, but if this starts becoming the mindset, which it will, because remember, the thoughts that we have get converted into the words that we speak, which get converted into the actions that we do, which change the mindset that we are in. I think this is also a great opportunity for organizations. Just a few decades ago, safety wasn't that big a deal in organizations, and organizations realized what would be the revenue implications of an unsafe working environment, the reputational implications of that, and they took some exceedingly good measures, and many organizations today can actually be called world-class in terms of their safety and security emphasis. I think we need to do the same thing for mental health. By the way, none of these changes, this got a lot of precedence to it, so there's nothing new. These changes, such as working from home and multiple cafeterias and creches at the workplace and desktop being replaced with laptops and mobile phone allowances, these were all done for improving the corporate bottom line. I mean, the employee convenience was a corollary to it, but the primary driver was the fact that organizations were looking to improve their bottom line. Many years ago, I remember we had a chemistry teacher. Chemistry, physics, he used to teach us in school. And one day I remember in class, we were trying to pull his leg and say, sir, why don't you teach us alchemy? Then we will just learn how to make, gold out of lead. And the teacher, obviously, we were pulling his leg and he was, way smarter than we were. He said that, do you know this light bulb that you see in class? 80% of the energy it consumes goes into heat. Only 20% goes into light. If you can just make that 20% into 40%, you would have actually done alchemy. You would have changed lead into gold. And of course, it was done in the bulb industry by the LED lights. I think that's the opportunity we have with the people right now. I mean, I'm fascinated 747's control panel, which will tell him how many times he went to do a loo if he wants to know that. But are we really looking at initiatives which will convert that heat energy into light? Are we looking at how do we improve the mindset of that person, the positive thinking of that person, that can-do attitude? How do we bring that into play? Because it's a fact that if your brain is in a bad place, no matter how well educated you are, no matter how much of wisdom you have, you will come up with bad plans. But if your brain is in a good place, then everything that you will do, every plan that you will make will be a good plan. Now, I believe, though I'm speaking to the HR fraternity, but many of my HR friends know this, and I have been groomed by some of the the titans in this space like Prem Kamath and all of these people who always taught me that HR is a line role, and I've always believed that because I also came from the army where we have no HR head. Every captain, every platoon commander is the HR head. I think this has to be a CXO driven program. The image that you see over here is another story that I want to end with, which was told to me by another friend of mine, who said that he noticed in his company around about 4 o'clock, people were, I actually read it in some article, that around 4 o'clock in a normal working day, your glucose levels go down. And when your glucose levels go down, you feel lethargic and you don't feel, you can't do any deep work or concentration work at that point of time. He decided to institute just one fruit being given at about 3:45. And he said that actually not only did the productivity increase, but the happiness quotient increased. For the last 2 hours, instead of people being lethargic, so I could actually see them giving each other high fives and all of that when they're walking out. It has to be driven with a very clear goal that we are looking at it from a operating profit, from a organizational efficiency point of view, not because we want to do some feel good kind of a thing, or we are a nice organization so we do these nice things. If we do it as a nice thing, if we do it as a program that we are doing, or a helpline that we have created, I think we are going through the motions. But if this is tied in, if it is tied into the organization's business value chain, then I think we will be able to pull up our troops and take them to face arguably what is going to be the hardest battle of their life. Because when we come out of this, these cages in which we have been kept, and these cages are open, there are two ways in which people can come out. They can either come out like gladiators come out into the arena, rushing in to embrace the fight, or they can also come out like birds who have been caged for a long period of time. When you open the door also, they come out, they're completely disoriented, they don't even want to fly, and many of them actually want to crawl back into the cage. This is a very famous naval saying that no matter how well you captain a ship, if your ship runs aground, it really cannot be recovered. It's a fact. It cannot be recovered. There's no way to drag it back and all. Eventually the ship has to be broken into pieces and taken away. Now, the point is, as I used the metaphor in the beginning, our ships are going down all around us. They're going down. But because every ship is going down, we don't see that change happening. And I think we need to recognize that mental health, anxiety, these kind of issues, which usually were, we need to do something about it. Next quarter we'll do. We'll take them for an offsite. What the bloody hell? We'll take them for an off. I don't think that is going to solve the problem. I think if we don't do this turnaround quickly, our ships could come to a point where there will be point of no return, and our troops will indeed be very demoralized. So I hope that struck a chord with some of you. If there are any questions, and if you have the time for it, I'd be happy to take them on. Otherwise, thanks a ton for this opportunity to speak with you. I know what I said was contrary, not usually what I speak about, but I genuinely see this as a concern that organizations should be looking at this point of time. Thank you very much once again.
Do we have any question for the Captain Raghu Raman? Pallavi, do we have any question?
No questions right now. We'll come back to them.
Sure.
Any questions? Anyone has any questions? Please type them in the question and answer tab.
Or anybody from the speaker panel can also ask the question.
Yes.
Maybe Mahalakshmi, Gagan Priya, Mr. Nathan, Ashok, Mr. Ashok.
You can also ask them.
Captain, so now my question to you, a small question, right? I think mental health and well-being, we talked enough now, especially in the recent times, last 1 year, we're talking enough about this. Or maybe we all of us become more aware about this. Do you think it's become more a buzzword these days, or now, or this problem has been in the old times back as well?
So actually, it's a good point that you said. I think you said a very deep sentence. I don't think you realized you said it. You said we have been talking a lot about it these days. Yeah, we've been talking a lot. I don't think we have been doing much about it. We have now not done much about it. You see, it's also a very cultural issue in India. Culturally in India, the portrayal of a leader, I'm going back culturally, it's that karta, it is the head of the family, it is that man who will know exactly what needs to be done. Our leadership style also evolved over a period of time with the industrial age, where it's an authoritarian leader. You join the civil services, you join the army, you join a refinery at the lowest level of the pyramid, and then you work your way up. You've seen every downturn, you have seen every cycle, you have seen labor strikes, you have seen industrial accidents, and then you come up to the top. And if you have white hair, or in some cases no hair, you are considered to be smarter than a person who has. So it's a very authority-based leadership, and that works very well in the industrial era. In the knowledge environment, it's a very different situation. I can give you a personal example that when I worked with Reliance, one culture of Reliance was the industrial DNA, where you joined as a graduate engineer trainee and you worked your way up. And after 40 years, when you became the plant manager of Jamnagar, you pretty much knew everything there was to know about refining. The other side, Geo, if you knew something about the CDMA technology, you were a liability in the current environment. So it was a completely different DNA. And I think as we evolve into the knowledge space, the leadership style also needed to evolve. It needed to become much more of a coaching and a mentoring style. But when we are leading millennials, I think it has to be much more of a gardener leader style. A gardener leader is best explained by a gardener, which I think we discussed when we were talking. Mahalakshmi knows this story, that a gardener thinks of her job as a leader to create the right environment for the plants, to make sure there's adequate space between the plants, all of them get adequate sunlight, there is adequate nutrition, you remove the pests and all of that. But very rarely will you see a gardener shouting at a cactus plant and say, look at you bloody cactus, you know roses, you don't give any beautiful flowers, look at the rose plant, he'll get promoted, you'll be left behind and all of that stuff. Very unlikely, because a gardener knows that though sugarcane looks like a bamboo, you can't build houses out of it. And though bamboo looks like a sugarcane, you can't make juice. So a gardener leader knows that I need to provide the right environment which is psychologically safe for every plant to nourish. That is a very different style of leadership. And I think organizations were able to manage with the earlier styles inefficiently, but they were still managing. But I don't think in the future we'll be able to do that. We won't be able to exercise punitive styles of leadership much longer. Punitive styles of governance work only in environments of no fear. I'll explain it to you on a macro level and then you'll get it. So if you commit a crime, if you do pickpocketing, you will be sent into prison for a week. If you steal something bigger, if you do dacoity, it will be 10 years. If you commit murder, you may be hanged. What do you do to a suicide bomber? How do you deal with millennials who are on the edge anyway, who are already on the edge? How are you going to deal with it? So I think very clearly it may not have been of emphasis before. It may have become a buzzword now. But like most buzzwords, a word becomes a buzzword because it is pointing to an underlying deficiency which needs to be addressed. High time it's addressed. That's why it becomes a buzzword.
Thank you. Thanks, Captain Raghu. Yeah.
Dave, there are 1 or 2 questions on this thing. Do you want me to read them out?
Okay.
Okay. So the first, maybe one. We can take one.
Sure.
How can we customize solutions? 1 minute. Sorry. How can we customize solutions on mental health? Companies have created EAP platforms with limited impact And how can we be more proactive on wellness, mental, physical, and social? And what role do you see HR playing in this?
I've always believed that these platforms have a utility, and unfortunately, the seduction of platforms is so much that the utility. Let me give you an example. I'm sure all corporates have this thing which is tied into their algorithm that on the birthday of their employee, the employee gets a mail. I also get a mail from my bank, from my post office. I get my mail from every individual who knows my date of birth, wherever I filled it out. Now, this one mail which comes from the corporate, it doesn't really add to it. Matter of fact, it subtracts something from it. I'd much rather if someone just came up to me and said, hey, it's your birthday today. Oh, something like that. For me, that is a much more of a connect. Now, what has happened is in this seduction of a platform, because the platform gives feature for that also, we have moved many things which actually don't belong in a platform into a platform. So organizations have started becoming smart, yes, but they have started losing heart. I'll give you a very practical example, and I think most of us will be able to relate with it. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, an employee could accost me in a corridor. He could accost me and say, sir, you know, you have transferred me to Jamnagar and I just brought my mother. So last week I brought her here for a cataract operation. वो सर एक महीने में मैं ऑपरेशन करवा के फिर मैं चले जाऊंगा सर एंड आप जाऊंगा तो अभी भी इफ यू टेल मी टू गो नाउ आई हैव टू गो आई हैव नो ऑप्शन बट इफ यू गिव मी आई कुड लुक इनटू द गाय एंड गेट अ सेंस दैट दिस गाय इज टेलिंग द ट्रूथ सही बोल रहा है I'd call up the HR guys, इसको करो यार, delay this by, no sir, come on, but manage, do something, you know, figure out a way, hold him there, you know, figure out a way to make it happen, and it would happen. Today, the chances are the same mail will come to me, same request will come to me in an email. And when it comes to me, it already has the comments of the HR BP partner. It has the comments of the person where he is going to join and the person who's relieving him saying, no, if you do this, it will set a precedence. And once it sets a precedence, this will happen. That guy will say, no, Jamnagar will explode if the guy does not come on Thursday, this Thursday, and all of that. And you will be steered towards following the SOP. I think a leader's job is to deviate from the SOP. It is not to follow the SOP. A manager's job may be to follow the SOP. A true leader's job is to deviate from the SOP because a leader realizes that SOPs were written for situations of the past. They cannot cater to situations of the present. They cannot cater to stuff like chemistry, to the genuineness, to the tear welling in that guy's eye when he talks about his mother's cataract. It can't be captured in an EAP. It just can't be. And I think human resources element, and it's going to increase now. It's going to increase because contactless leadership, remote working, we'll really have to reinvent ourselves to say that how do we bring the human back into human resources.
Do we have any more questions, Pallavi?
We have, but do you want to take them now or later? We have questions, a few.
Okay. Captain Raghu, could you like to take one more question?
I'm happy to take it, but I don't want the program to be delayed, and I know that you already started late, so I'm okay. But
all right, Pallavi, a quick question, right? The last question for this.
Okay, so how can we democratize a coaching way of being in corporations?
I genuinely think it will all begin with leaders expressing their own vulnerability first. I can quote from my personal experience. A lot of my colleagues from Reliance will vouch for it. They will not just vouch, they'll thumpingly endorse it. That I can't remember acronyms. I just can't. And in every industry, you're aware that there'll be jumbles of acronyms. And in Reliance, there were 3 different sets of acronyms: hydrocarbon acronym, retail acronym, and geo acronyms. And many times I had asked the same question again and again. And I'd actually have, this is a true incident. I had my number 2 guy who would very often roll his eyes. You know, when I would ask the same acronym the 3rd or the 4th time, he'd roll his eyes. Ki sala Mukesh bhai kisko pakad ke le aaya? Isko acronym yaad nahi aa raha, pata nahi kya karega. And then one day there was an incident where a presentation was being made in front of Mr. Ambani, and he asked suddenly, "What is HC?" So I burst out laughing. I couldn't never control it. So he looked at me and said, "Why are you laughing?" I said, "No, with HC, to even I know it's hydrocarbon." But I'm very happy that a person who's been in the refining industry asks this, that I don't know what this is, because I think the first thing is leaders have to show their vulnerability. I don't know. I am also feeling a little. By the way, this is a tip which I think I gave to Mondelez also. I have advised all the CEOs whom I mentor that whenever you are doing a webinar with your employees, as you be, not every day, but whenever you are doing it once or twice, as you begin, get disturbed by somebody. Stage manager, have your daughter, son, wife, somebody come and disturb you, and then say, "Excuse me, 1 second," speak to her or him for a minute, go back to the camera and say, "I'm sorry, I was using my son's laptop to do this." The reason for doing this is a very subliminal communication that you're sending out to your troops, that it's okay. We are invading your home. You are not brought your children into the workspace. You don't have to shush your child who is behind you. You don't have to ask your kid to go below the chair behind you. You don't have to be tense. It's okay. We will have to rewire each one of these protocols. We can't just take what was happening in the real world and put it on a platform and think we have migrated our leadership. We can't do that. It has to be re-engineered for this platform. So that's my 2 bits on this. But I think, once again, thanks a ton, Dave. It was a great opportunity to meet all of you, meet all of you, speak to you. And I look forward to seeing you physically soon.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, Captain Raghu, for a very enlightening session of the mental well-being. It's truly mesmerized all of us. And we all know now the importance of the mental health includes our emotional, physiological, and the social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. So there's a quote which says, if we start being honest about our own pain, our anger, and our shortcomings, instead of pretending they do not exist, then maybe we will leave the world a better place than we found it. So with this note, we are closing this session, and thank you very much, Captain Raghu, for joining the session.
Thanks, Atan. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mahalakshmi. Thank you, Ganga.
The second part of the Track 3 discussion, the emerging business models, the key role of HR in accelerating business. And now we all have the very, very eminent speaker with us. As we all know that in an ideal world, HR tasks are defined and aligned with the goals of the organization. And to keep pace with accelerating businesses, HR roles are expected to be agile and have to move from transactional to transformational HR practices. To build thriving businesses within changing environment condition, HR needs to be future ready and in strategic alliance with the business and equally responsible for its result. So we have few of the questions, and to find the answer of these questions, I would like to welcome the eminent HR and business leader. Start with Ashok Ramchandran, Group Executive President HR, Aditya Birla Group. Ashok, welcome to the session. Gagan Priya Chakravarti, India Site Head and Managing Director, Ford Motors Company. Welcome, Gagan Priya.
Thank you.
Mahalakshmi, Head HR India, Mondelez International. Mahalakshmi, welcome once again. Mr. S.V. Nathan, Partner and Chief Talent Officer. Mr. Nathan will also moderate this session. And the next, Mr. Praduman Pandey, CHRO, Mother Dairy Fruits and Vegetable Private Limited. So, Mr. Nathan, over to you for the session.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Jha. What a pleasure to be here with all of you. What a scintillating session by Captain Raghuraman. It's very difficult to speak after Captain Raghuraman, who has addressed all of us. He's a general in these matters. I am but a poor major who is coming along with a few brigadiers trying to get all your attention back to the subject to hand, role of HR in accelerating business. And here is how Major Nathan will attempt to get your attention. Soldiers, the general has made some general points. The major will now make some major points, along with the brigadiers, of course. Hey, by the way, a person who puts a thought into your head is a teacher. A person who puts money into their pocket is a businessman. A person who can do both is my wife, which means put a thought into my head and money into her pocket. A person who can do neither is a moderator. So on this score, I'm adequately qualified. So I'm told Monday is a day when we have all the maximum heart attacks that you could ever have on the planet. Fortunately, the organizers have got this on a Saturday. So I think we can thank NHRD for organizing this outstanding panel that you're about to be on a Saturday afternoon. I have the pleasure of getting some really outstanding people here. What I wish to do is, instead of having long speeches, I would just dive straight into this, ask a few questions, allow for people who are listening in to also ask a few questions. And towards the end, I promise that I'll ask some rapid fire questions as well. So this way you get a perspective of what the subject is, and then we can steam along. My very first question to you, Maha, is, do you believe purpose has any influence on a business? Any example? Maha?
Yeah, absolutely. Am I audible, Major Nathan?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so Brigadier reporting, sir. So, well, I think it's absolutely exciting that, on this topic of, what is the way HR can create impact, we are actually starting with purpose, because it is my personal belief and experience that perhaps one of the most seminal things that our function can do is to facilitate, a bunch of leaders and the entire organization to align around a common purpose. And as Captain Raghuraman very beautifully articulated, it's not a bunch of machines that we are dealing with, right? I mean, it is people, and the passion and the discretionary effort with which people come in depends significantly in terms of, are they able to find a common purpose and align to it? And maybe I'll take a quick example from within Mondelez to talk about 3 important pieces that purpose can deliver. So around 2 years ago, 200 of us across 15 countries, business leaders met to really, spend time immersing ourselves with the consumers and to really say, okay, what is the purpose? Why does Mondelez really exist? And I think the articulation that we came up with is Mondelez exists, and our purpose is to lead the future of snacking, which essentially means that anytime a consumer wants to put anything in their mouth, other than the 3 main meals or 2 main meals if you're into intermittent fasting, any snack that you consume, we need to have a solve there. And that really gave tremendous clarity to us in terms of where we need to play. Where are we today? What do we manufacture? What do we produce? And if we want to lead the future, where is our consumer going? And do we have solutions to where they are headed? So 3 things that it really helped us do. 1, provide clarity towards what is it that the company needs to focus itself on. 2nd, create inspiration. 200 of us actually wrote letters from the future. Sitting in 2030, what is the consumer going to talk about what Mondelez did in 2018 that altered the world of snacking? And that really allowed us to imagine and really paint a picture with which, when we pulled it all together, we could create an image that could inspire and galvanize the entire workforce. And the 3rd thing at which we are really playing and experimenting with today is to say, how do we tie in individual purpose of each employee with that bigger organizational purpose? Because it is that link that will really fuel discretionary effort. So we can go into details later into the session. But since we are starting with purpose, I would really say our function has a fantastic opportunity to pull the leadership team together, irrespective of which level you are in, leaders of that function, that unit, to come together and say, what is the legacy we want to leave behind? Provide clarity, provide inspiration, and find ways to inspire the broader organization with.
Wow. So well said, Maha. Thank you so much. I'm going to lead Ashok on to this other question. I know you've done a lot of work in this, Ashok. What is the role of HR in upping productivity in an organization? And of course, some examples. Ashok, we are unable to hear you.
You need to unmute yourself. You are on mute, Mr. Ashok. Please unmute.
Ashok, you need to unmute, Ashok. Yes. Okay. So you may want to come back, Ashok. Okay, till such time Ashok comes back, let's do this. Let's look at a business leader, an HR professional turned business leader, Gangapriya. So, GP, give us some idea about culture and change, which people say are so important to accelerating business. What are your thoughts? And since you have seen HR up close and personal, and of course now leading a business, so how do you see this?
Yeah, first of all, thanks so much for having me on this panel and really looking forward to it. And Nathan, I never knew that you had that funny bone in you. Sort of couldn't control myself. Yeah, I think culture and change have always been somewhere in the realm. There are behaviors and actions that sort of reflect culture, and change needs to follow certain processes. It's sort of remained as an aspect that sort of is in the background, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be followed, but didn't get the kind of attention that it did. You know, sure. When you ask companies, how would you define your culture? Many of them struggle to do that. At Ford, I see that we are at a very important stage in our evolution as an organization. We are morphing ourselves from being a product-led company to a services organization. Yeah, and a lot of organizations in the automotive sector thought that there were heavy entry barriers, and then one fine day an Elon Musk comes in and sort of gets a successful business going in the automotive sector and changes all the rules and regulations of how the business is run. And that is a big wake-up call for the automotive industry. And what I see at Ford is that, you know, we are trying to change ourselves from being a product-led organization, not taking away the strengths that we have in coming up with really fabulous products, but, you know, attending to what our customers want in the form of experience and services and tools and products, etc. Now, this calls for an entirely different change in terms of the culture that is required in the organization, plus a process of change management so that we can make this change quite seamlessly. In fact, when I joined Ford about 8 years ago, I was really surprised that we had a discipline of change management within HR, and what we called an Organizational Development Institute with a certification for change management that was almost like consultant class and top notch. But for HR, who sort of learned about the tools and methodologies, nobody even knew about it. Yeah, and there was no ask for something like that. And HR would try to push it in slowly to sort of see, is there a taker for this? Yeah, and similarly with culture, you know, when you come into Ford, you can really sense that family warmth that sort of goes with working at Ford. But for the first time, the company actually got down to articulating what it needed in its culture. And it was a huge revelation to employees. to say that, this is really who we are and this is what we want to become. And once behaviors, actions were sort of associated with the culture that we desire to be, I think it spoke to employees. And they were ready to sort of go about changing themselves, their behaviors, their actions that could then accelerate the company on its journey ahead. Yeah, so I would say that, HR has often been called the culture architect within an organization, or a culture curator sometimes, or a change manager or a change facilitator. I think in the last few years, and particularly with the pandemic, I believe that those two aspects of HR's role has really shot into the limelight. And whether we are talking about a new kind of leadership, we are talking about a new kind of employee engagement, we are talking about a new kind of a culture, I think these are two aspects, particularly culture, for which I think HR needs to take responsibility and drive the kind of initiatives that will bring about the change.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, GP. I'll go back to Ashok. Ashok, is your mic working? Are you on? Ashok, go ahead.
Can't hear you, Ashok. Hey, Pallavi, can you please try to fix this?
Yes, I have a message, Ashok. Ashok, please try and refresh your browser, Ashok. You can't hear. He can't hear us.
So I can hear Pallavi, but yes.
No, can Ashok hear us?
Hey, Ashok, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Okay. So it appears that you can hear us.
But we are not able to hear us.
But
okay.
We can't hear you.
Refresh your browser, Ashok. Refresh your browser.
Ashok, here is the request. Can you please refresh
He's
the browser?
already logged out and logged in is I think what he's saying, but it's not working.
Yeah, he said that. He logged out and he logged in. So,
I will get someone to talk to.
Phone?
Thank you.
Exactly. So till such time Ashok comes back. So Maha, this is a question to you. Now there is a lot of buzz around Agile. Now, what is this subject about? And everybody is looking at agility in organizations. People are looking at HR. Can you throw some light on what this is and what it would do to impact business?
No, absolutely. And I was kind of smiling as you said the word agile, because I think live in this event, there have been at least 2 or 3 agility examples, right? One is NHRD popping in and out of AirMeet to YouTube and coming back. That is agile. And us kind of trying to run this panel and, trying to see if we can support Ashok from this back is another one. So Ashok, welcome back. I hope we can hear you next. But let me respond quickly on the agile one, because I think it has a beautiful correlation with culture, which I think Gagapriya, spoke about and, in a detailed way articulated the storyline from the Ford perspective. Now, Agile, interestingly, I mean, at Mondelez, we've been very intentionally over the last 4 years curating what we call an agile growth culture. And it has its genesis in the fact that while we were growing as a business, I think the sense was that we were not really growing to potential, so how do we really embed, agility to succeed? And I think there were 3 very simple tenets that we leveraged. I'm happy to share if that is meaningful to any of you on the call, who actually wants to, try these out. So the first tenet that we really said is we got to start with empathy and a very deep and passionate understanding of where the consumer wants to go. So wear the shoes of the consumer, do a lot of immersions, engage with the consumer. And amidst COVID, we actually use technology through what we call the KYC or Know Your Consumer app. not just the consumer insights team, but the entire organization dialing in into consumer emotions to really understand what is the consumer snacking on. So Agile starts with empathy. And the second core of Agile, which perhaps many of you, if you're from the software industry, would perhaps know this well, works on this thing called Scrum, which is really rapid prototyping. So instead of doing one perfect launch, keep doing, create something, a solution, test it out. If it doesn't work, adapt and modify it again. And, a couple of quick examples that you might be able to relate to. Very recently, we launched a cereal product using the Bonvita, ingredients called Bonvita Fills. Bonvita Fills is a pilot launched only in 3 states. And depending on our learnings from that, we are going to now see whether to expand it further. Likewise, route to market, we've been experimenting by splitting our portfolio in different ways and seeing which model gives us better results. So agility is starting with empathy, doing a lot of test and learns, and now coming to the softer side, 2 very important things. I think we realized it's super important for us to be an agile enterprise that we really inspect how we respond to failure. There was a time wherein people would frown at failure. Then came the time wherein we said, look, we got to fail fast, fail cheap. But I think now we are spending more time to say, okay, are we doing a series of tests, or are we pausing to make the time to learn from where we succeeded and where we failed, so that we can integrate it into the next project or the next experiment that we do? And agile leadership in that sense calls for not only being vulnerable, but also really being somebody who can encourage these tests and encourage the learnings from it. So that is in a quick example, what we are doing with agility, really trying to see if we can integrate it in a very, very intentional way into the growth culture we are building at Mondelez.
Hey, Mana, when you were speaking, for a moment I was wondering whether you were the chief marketing officer of Mondelez or a person who was in human resources. But regardless, I want to again do a quick check to see if Ashok is back. Ashok?
Hi, Nathan, can you hear me?
Absolutely. Hey, boy, you're back.
No,
I wanted the question. Go ahead.
God help. Yeah, Nathan, you were saying on the question earlier, I think you spoke about productivity.
Exactly. I know you've done a lot of work on productivity.
Okay, so hi everybody, and apologies for the glitch. So I had to log off and log in again, but pleasure being back. And thank you everybody for being patient with our entire organizing team. They're putting their heart and soul behind getting us across. And so truly appreciate all of our patience, all of us being there and encouraging the organizing team as well. As a fraternity, I guess collaboration is on live, so to say, as we speak. And I knew Maha or Gangapriya would step in to air cover me should further disaster strike. But really happy to be back. And I could listen to all of them, but I couldn't speak. So let me cover, maybe, Nathan, there are 6 aspects I wanted to quickly air cover. 3 softer aspects and 3 specific things I believe HR people could do, should do more of when we talk about productivity. And I think it's gone from output by input kind of ratios. People talk about EBITDA by employee, revenue per employee. Those are obvious stuff. So I think numerator by denominator is an obvious thing to do. Now, actually speaking, HR, other than measuring it, may not necessarily directly have an impact. So I think we must, as HR people, look within and say, what can I impact, which will be held accountable for, where I can make a material difference? And a few things come to me. 3 soft aspects and 3 specific things. I thought one, of course, I can't influence productivity unless I understand the key business drivers. And therefore, you must understand the key business drivers peculiar to your businesses. Otherwise, normally HR people will get pretty sidelined and treated for what we end up sometimes becoming as normal appointment letters, papers, and, give me the bucket of stuff kind of things. So you must know your business drivers to have a conversation with the business team on even keel, so that they understand that you know the business enough to make a difference. So it could be sales, manufacturing, services, whatever it takes. They are equally keen on productivity. So you must know your business. And that's at a very core level. And it could start from P&L, it could start to your process. So it depends on what you're doing there. The second, this is something which I core believe, I've learned to believe over time, that productivity is not just a hardware. It's also your attitude to help people succeed and not see productivity as a tool alone. If I want to help you do well, I'll get your productivity up. If I have gaps in my efficiency and my effectiveness, if my HR colleague can partner me, I suspect I'll come off better tomorrow morning when you touch me in a certain helpful, attitudinal, helping me succeed manner. I think people come every day to help to succeed, and you must be there to help them succeed. So it's a bit of a software in the HR head that we need to fix. Third is really role of technology and digital. And this could be a real Waterloo for most HR people, because I think we've all schooled in a time when we've seen the physicality of HR. But if you don't know technology, digital, ways of working which are completely different, how a 5,000 people plant can suddenly morph into a 700 people, double the capacity plant, and what does skill sets mean, you'll be outdated. So understanding digital and technology, Nathan, is coming up as a software change in the HR head that we need to engineer. And then I'm quickly going to cover three hardwares, hardwares as in things that we need to do. One is reskilling opportunities to be harnessed. I think it's a duty we owe to our businesses to identify reskilling opportunities. There's no bravery in HR people saying, but you're not ready for the next role. Oh, but you're lagged behind. You're not good on productivity. That's a sad state. Whether you're a unionized employee or non-unionized, it doesn't matter. Can you help me reskill ahead of time and prepare me for yourself, for the company, is your credit. And I think if you don't do that, there's no point sitting in a decision maker's chair and holding people, we need to downsize and downskill. So that doesn't work. The second subject is simplifying processes and removing bureaucracies of approval. All of us have, large companies have multiple layers of 40 people to ask, and don't ask me, but just bounce it off me kind of soft bureaucracy, which assails every company. So can I, as an HR person, have the courage, the backbone to play a strong role in simplifying processes, helping partner the business to sort out the real core? And to me, that amplifies productivity. And the last point really, which is again a skill set. Now, what I'm going to say now is a hard skill set for HR people to learn and invest. And therefore, when Gangapriya talks about a whole course on change management, it just kind of was clanging a bell in my head, which is all about, you must, as HR people, all of us, must know organization design, workflows, job design as a core skill set. It's not instinctive. I can't get up in the morning and give you gyan on org design. I'll be seen through in a minute. So you must know right from job evaluation upwards to org design and process redesign. You must invest in that skill set to know it. Business loves you for that. And they will say, thank you so much for helping me improve what is a typical business accountability called productivity. You made a difference. I think those are the three hardwares, Nathan, I just wanted to share, apart from the three rewiring on the head that I wanted to share.
Oh, lovely. So you got the hardware and the software covered. Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Ashok. And although der hai durust hai, as they say. So moving on, this is to you, Gangapriya. COVID has really got HR right in the center of business. And so as a business leader, what opportunities would you see for HR making this big shift? Because everybody is now looking at HR. So what do you think HR should really be doing right now?
Yeah, I think, Nathan, you said it right. I think the financial crisis perhaps catapulted finance to the center stage. And in a lot of ways, I think COVID and the pandemic has really put HR in the center stage, because it's really been, it's turned into a people issue at the end of the day, impacting business, of course. So I think we have a great opportunity as HR, or we've had a great opportunity over the last 12 months as HR to sort of have our stamp on business decisions that have been taken. Earlier in some of the sessions that I attended yesterday's inaugural as well as this morning, we heard several business leaders talk about how HR became their first trusted partner while they took decisions that impacted business, and how they elevated the HR person from wherever the person was in the organizational hierarchy, as well as in terms of the visibility and the acceptance of that person as a leadership team member, to being next to the CEO of the organization. Yeah, so I think this is an opportunity that we have got. In doing this, I think what has also been highlighted is that, for a long time, we have said people are our biggest assets. I think more than ever, this pandemic has really brought to fore the fact that, we need to invest even more in our people. Yeah, and we need to take care of our people even more than before. And that if we take care of people, there is magic that can happen. And several of the business leaders who spoke earlier actually talked about it. For the first time, HR was making decisions that were impacting business. I mean, they were talking about those kinds of examples. So I believe that here is our time. This is our time, and I think we have to look forward to it. So as far as HR is concerned, many times, we really don't use tools, methodologies, data, etc., and therefore it all seems like a sort of pseudoscience, yeah, or a gut or an instinct that is the basis of our decisions. But I think what has happened in a lot of organizations during the pandemic is this constant reaching out to employees, getting a pulse of what they're feeling, how they're doing, what do they need. Yeah, which I think has formed the basis of decisions that the company has taken. So if we sort of strengthen our ability to deliver with good data, good perspectives, which is based on experiences and anecdotes, yeah, and listening in to what employees, managers, people leaders have to say, I think we will be in a better position to say how the decisions around HR are being taken, and therefore it will lend that much more credibility to the kind of decisions that we are taking as HR. But the fact is, I think maybe a decade of HR is here in front of us. Yeah, and that we have to rise up, we have to adopt data, we have to adopt technology, we have to adopt ways by which we can skill people so that they can deliver on their jobs and really be delivering to what the business expects of us.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Gangapriya. I have a very short question for you, Ashok. Ashok, you're always very passionate about accountability in human resources as it supports the business. So any quick take on that, and we'll come on to the rapid fire question.
Yeah, listen, this is a topic which is indeed fascinating, and I would encourage all of us to explore it. And I must say, this is not, I don't have a 4-step formula to heaven on this one. We are all working on this, and I think few experiments to share, few journeys to share that we are undergoing at Aditya Birla Group, and work in progress on this one. One is, you look at all of our roles in hiring, and one of the concepts I've been talking to our HR colleagues is that we must hold ourselves not just accountable, but deferred accountability. So I've been talking about deferred accountability, saying that I might go to campuses, for example, and recruit X number of trainees and come back and say, I've done my job, recruited trainees. But I want to know how many of these trainees succeeded over time. Can I hold my hirers accountable for the quality of hiring, including lateral hiring? Can I hold my various panels accountable for hiring? And when I say that, the moment I say that, the answer I get, Nathan, is no, but success is a function of culture, onboarding, my boss, his uncle, everything has to happen for me to succeed. Surely, I agree. I don't doubt that. I'm not saying hiring alone is holding the key. But for sure, each of us have in our companies some fantastic hirers and some people you look next door and you wonder how come this person is on the panel. So you must have accountability for deferred successes, which means using analytics, correlations to successes, multi-factors to somebody's success. And if I factorize somebody's success to 5-6 factors, holding yourself accountable to individual factors is an experiment we are currently undergoing. I've asked all our talent staffing community, our hiring community to say, give me a model. And we are currently piloting a couple of models to say, how do I hold accountability? And I might be a fantastic manager, but may not be a terrific hirer. And I think these are journeys we are starting to really put to the table. It's making people think. It's also holding line. And for example, the second factor we are asking about is succession plan pipeline. And that's an action which quite often companies come to the action of needing to fill somebody and we say we're not ready for that pipeline. And then we rush outside and recruit, and we make a virtue of recruiting smartly outside and say I've done a good job recruiting. But I didn't do a good job because I didn't have a pipeline. Correct. So what is my future now called deferred on the reverse? Accountability to ensure I have a pipeline, and can I hold myself accountable for it? And I think so. These are questions which are really coming. Third, training, which is again, you're the guru on training, Nathan, and it'll be interesting to get your point of view on this before you move to the next question as well, is to say training, digital or otherwise, is no more mandates and coverage and inputs and so on. How do I hold people accountable to the entire series of interventions to help people build into the readiness quotient? Can I factorize readiness and play a role there? So factorizing the end output is a journey we are currently undergoing, and holding accountability either for your future output or for the deferred accountability of most of our initiatives. Because quite often HR can say, I've done it and gone away, and I've moved on to my next initiative. So the doctors have succeeded, the patient is struggling. We need to fix it. So I think, therefore, the concept of holding ourselves a little to the neck on deferred accountability, equally line managers, but let's start with ourselves, taste our own poison a little bit, is the approach we are taking to deferred accountability. Experiments are on. 8 months from now, on another platform, happy to share that back with our NHRDN colleagues who are lined in here. But Nathan, your thought on that? Where do you fit into that?
I'm supposed to be the moderator, and I'm supposed to be asking the questions. But let me just take 30 seconds on this. I think gone are the days when we expect people to learn. We should only provide a context and infrastructure. We would expect people to learn. They should be ready for what the next role is, and the kind of skills that is required. You can only draw some kind of a roadmap and provide all of that structure which is there. The accountability then is on the individual, because gone are the days when you say you got to do 40 hours of training and that's how you will go ahead. We expect our people to be ready for the next role. We will provide all that there is. So that's all of the 30 seconds. I'm now going on to my rapid fire question, and I'm going to do it in this particular order. So all of you be ready. So this is the AGM round. AGM round is Ashok starting first, Gangapriya going next, and Maha going third. So we'll do AGM. And all I want is one word from you for each one of this. No sentences, nothing. Just one word. Innovation. What can HR do? Ashok.
Liberate our workforce.
Gangapriya.
Provide space to fail.
Maha.
Reimagine.
Excellent. What distinguishes a top HR professional today? Ashok.
Authenticity.
Gangapriya.
Business acumen.
Maha.
Agility.
What is the one skill that you will ask of an HR professional today? Ashok?
Make a difference. Not one word, but yeah.
GP?
MAD. Make a difference.
Empathy.
Excellent. Maha?
Listening.
Excellent. Excellent. So, how can HR create value for the business? Value. One word. Ashok?
I would say be reflective of impact.
Okay. Reflective, impact, 2 words. Okay. Gangapriya?
Something similar. Listen and play back.
Okay. Maha?
push boundaries. It actually boils down to be intention of impact, but push the boundaries to, and get everyone to, maybe enable would be the one word.
Enable. Okay. Now I'm getting on to some real easy ones, and my eyes are completely on to the watch that I have, which is blaring at me. Okay, so this is again AGM. Ashok, book or movie?
Book.
Gangapriya?
Would like book, but drawn to movie.
book any day.
Okay, so I'm going to say your names again and again, so I expect that if you have not got into that rhythm there.
You'll just follow.
Role model.
Sorry?
Role model. Your role model.
Of influencing is actually, I go back to Gandhiji.
Gandhiji,
from an influencing organization point of view.
Gangapriya?
Young people.
Maha?
Something to, there's a
dilemma, the biggest dilemma that HR people face today?
Oh, that's a good one. Okay, AGM, start with you.
good one.
Biggest dilemma for HR sometimes I see, and Nathan did take a shot at it as well, is
sure.
I think the backbone to be fair and correct.
Excellent.
I would say rocking the boat.
Yeah.
I would say having the ability to balance productivity with reinvesting where growth lies.
The line between being authentic on the HR side, the people side, or the business side, and getting caught.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nathan, just want to add on a thought here. I think one of the things that just want to add on a thought here. I think one of the points that I found useful to cultivate over time, and I'm sure a lot of our HR colleagues do that for a living, but is ability to have an honest conversation, even if at times it's not convenient, but you must have an honest. People appreciate the sheer honesty of thank you for telling me as is,
absolutely,
even if I don't like it. So that's the thought I just thought I'll leave behind as an addition.
And especially with leaders.
Yeah. Being authentic, even in a conversation, can we just be our honest self and say things as they are? And then you will find a veil of a difference. Okay,
I so agree. And I'm so tempted to build that. I think sometimes, psychological safety is mistaken for not being honest, and I think there is a space for balancing candor with psychological safety by getting the how right. So I think not mistaking, that is so important. As we talk about authenticity, vulnerability, social, psychological safety, we shouldn't inadvertently veer towards populism.
Absolutely. Keeping yourself honest, I think, is in top of all that list out there. So,
on the word courage to be myself.
Courage. Excellent.
And there were tough moments when I was stressed on that subject where I had to kind of look. But I think what has helped me in good stead is courage to do the right thing. And that has helped me in good stead. I've failed a couple of times using that, but it's worked.
Okay. Gangapriya?
I would say, Nathan, that I should have worked on myself long ago.
Excellent. Maha?
Let me break this into two, Mr. Nathan. I think one is, what would I perhaps tell myself you did well? That would perhaps be, I've always been extremely hungry to learn and deliver impact. So I think that I would say, well done on that one. What would I have done differently, and what would be my coaching to myself would be perhaps, pacing myself a little better, is something that I would have told my younger self. This is not a series of sprints. Take the time, pause, and then sprint again. I'm very poor at pausing, so that would have been something I tell myself.
I think it's a great question, actually, for all of us in HR to reflect once in a while on where we reach, because sometimes the senior you get, the uglier it gets, because you feel you're invincible, you've done very well, success grows on your shoulder a little bit like that. It's a bit of a moss. So you must be alert to not allowing that snowball to happen, Nathan. And now learning is being self-reflective once in a while is like a little bit of a pinch to yourself to say, scale down, and there are so many things you could do better. You could have done better. So great question, great sharing by Maha and Gangapriya as well. Thank you.
And what about you, Mr. Nathan? What would be your message to your younger self?
This is a difficult panel. Yeah, sometimes I do not know who's taking the role of a moderator.
We can't resist. We have you with us, so we have to ask you.
But I'll tell you where I am. Huh? I should have felt more comfortable in my skin. And the root of all, anything to do with just being authentic, being honest, being courageous, all lies just deep down there. So that's what I would tell myself. I wish I would have done that. That's what I tell myself. Anyways, I know that we are almost on top of the hour, if not more. But one very quick one, just one word. What motivates you? AGM.
The opportunity to make a difference.
Opportunity.
Really
Gangapriya?
I think it's an opportunity to create an impact.
Excellent. Maha?
Possibilities to realize not only my dreams, but enable so many dreams.
Excellent. Last question for this afternoon. What motivates your boss? Ashok?
Oh, oops. I'll just remove my laptop and open 3 files. Hold on. So I think impact. I think my boss thinks impact.
What motivates my boss?
Yes.
I think the team doing well.
Excellent. Excellent. Maha?
Your question makes me reflect. Number one, we need to be the boss we desire for ourselves. So that's my first reflection as I hear your question. But my response would be impact.
Impact. Excellent. 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 Well, on that note, what I'm going to do is I'm going to now turn this over to see if we have any questions. I'm not sure. We must have really gone over on the hour. So Dave, keep us honest. Are we on time, ahead of time? Do we have time for a couple of questions from the audience?
You are absolutely on the time, and we have another 5-10 minutes to answer a few of the questions. Pallavi, do we have any questions?
Yeah, we do. And there is one person who is raised hand, so I'll invite her on stage to ask this question. And this is Kavita Singh. I'm going to hand you the mic. If you can just come on stage and ask your question.
Sure.
Kavita, are you on? Yeah, she's just joining. Kavita, go ahead. Okay, as we wait for Kavita, maybe I'll ask one of the questions that has been put up in the Q&A tab.
Chat box, yes.
Yeah.
Sure.
How competencies play a key role in identifying future leaders, training needs, and design organization growth strategy?
This question goes straight to the guru of the subject, Nathan, over to you. Competencies and training and capabilities. My God. Built. Nathan, your thoughts, sir.
Competencies, capabilities, and?
Training.
And can you just repeat the question for me?
How do competencies play a key role in identifying future leaders, training needs, and design organizations' growth strategy?
Okay, a competency really is a distinguishing behavior. So if there are two things that are required by any individual to really flourish in an organization. One needs to learn, one needs to grow. And to grow, you need to learn. And to learn, you really need to know what are the areas that you've got to be good in. Competencies therefore play a key role which really kind of assesses where a person really is. So what is the distinguishing behavior that the person will have to then acquire, and see what is the level of, let's say, proficiency in those, and build capabilities in that. So I guess all three point to just one, which is what are the competencies required for this job, and how does one build that out? So I hope that answers that question. It's a very, very deep question. It requires a lot of time to respond to it, but this is the short answer.
Okay, thank you. Kavita, are you able to speak?
Nathan sir, while we are trying to connect with the Kavita, I have one question from the fire round for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what are the biggest roadblock employees encounter in the workplace today?
Bosses. I think many people have got into these positions without really understanding what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a manager, what is the role that they really have to play. And we completely underrate, when we were at one level and wanting to become the managers, the leaders, and the bosses, we had a certain aspiration. But once we reach that particular level, we forget those lessons. And I think that's the biggest thing. And we've got to constantly remind ourselves that there is the younger version of you, and we've got to keep visiting those nooks and corners, because that is where the true aspiration lies. All these things. And therefore, when GP talked about what inspires our young people, because they will keep you straight. They will tell you this is what is needed. And that is important for us. When our managers and our leaders, when I say managers, I'm not dissociating leaders from that. I think all of us, we need to really understand that sometimes if we just get out of the way, many things can happen. Yeah. You don't have to go far. Look at what happened to one of the test matches. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that.
And if I may add another aspect, I think as companies become large, I think there's also bureaucracy that steps in. If we can free employees of bureaucracy, I think we'll be doing them a favor, and we'll be doing the organization a favor. Because, bureaucracy really have the power to change it. Yeah, and I think bureaucracy is really the soul-crushing aspect of big organizations today.
Yeah. And I'm so tempted to build on that, Dave. So this is becoming a reverse rapid fire. But I would also say, if I take organizations out for a moment, and if I go back to, the message back to the younger self that I heard, I would also say, free to be yourself, and nurturing our own strengths rather than focusing so much on the opportunity area that, you're trying to become somebody else. I think that could actually just come in the way of us realizing our potential. So that's also an important one for all of us individually to just remember as we, reflect on our own growth.
Maha, I'm tempted to add something to what you just said. I just want to build on that. And perhaps part of this is because we don't seek feedback. So we think these are our strengths, and feedback can stump us because people will say, this is what you're good at, what you're strong at, and this is what you ought to be doing. And then you say, my, I didn't realize this.
Yeah.
And the bitter truth, or the sweetest of words, will not supplement what really you could be good at. And many a career has faltered at the altar because they have put paid to just good advice. And our ability to then seek advice, seek feedback, and then grow on it. And by the way, the feedback is not really coming in from the top. It could come in from people who are your peers, but more importantly, people who are your subordinates. And if they don't feel free, you can even do something like an anonymous survey. But that could help.
Sure.
Okay. If you have time and if there are no questions, I have one more question. See, Gangapriya, we'll start with you. You know, there is a lot of work in the recent past around business analytics, HR analytics, and I know both in the roles that you have played in the past as you're playing today, there's a whole host of things that can be done there. And the role of HR in accelerating this business, that can really be a driver. So I would like all the members on the panel to just give a couple of examples, but starting with you, Gangapriya.
Yeah, I think, more often than not, all of our HR data are data that we take to use to make decisions out of the past. Yeah, and I think what this entire analytics revolution and technology is allowing us to do is really use that data, but also predict for the future so that we can be more proactive and take decisions based on what we may have seen and experienced and what the data talks to us about. I think HR is, there's definitely a need for more and more of our HR decisions to be based on data. Yeah, so that there is credibility to the kind of decisions and actions that we are taking. So I think that's one. And therefore, I think HR folks need to really get on top of what it takes to sort of be savvy with data. Yeah, and also how to read data, how to interpret it, and know what needs to be done. The other thing with HR data is also that it is very layered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's very important for us to sort of understand the layers of inferences that can be drawn from HR data. Yeah, and I think we have that in all of us, because we work in that area where we are able to pick up the unsaid, the unspoken.
Yeah,
we're able to sort of correlate experiences with what we are seeing from data. And I think putting both together is a skill set that we have, which we underestimate. Yeah, and I think we need to sort of unleash that to a greater extent.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can add to Gangapriya. I think Gangapriya has made a fantastic point there in terms of bringing alive our new skill sets that all of us have to learn. There can't be any more excuses not to do it, irrespective of whether you were a math student or otherwise. Or whether you are very good in the softer aspects of HR, as we've all kind of grown up on, or this, you must know it. So that is one part, and fully endorsing what she's saying. The second angle, which she did allude to, but I thought I'll just kind of build on that to say that I think there is, in handling real world situations, there is a need to bring that predictive thinking and mind to that solutioning. So if you say attrition is an issue, it is a human issue. It is less a statistic issue. But with the data and your ability to think ahead, think back, think ahead, you can actually bring data and analytics, the way she said, to bear on a real issue, to tackle a real issue for the company and maybe for the attriting employees. So I think there is lots of insights and solutioning, which is just lying below the analytics frame. But if you get through the analytics correctly, you get that nectar. Otherwise, you'll be playing on top. You'll be doing some funny stuff to stop attrition, etc., etc. But you must get the analytics engine to get to that nectar of insights and solutioning. Just want to add on to what Gangapriya said.
So my builds perhaps are absolutely on, so I would say perhaps two more things. I would say the insights that you get from all the analytics is as good as the data that is fed into any of this, and this is coming from a lot of tech implementation experiences that most of us have had, you put nonsense data in and you get trashy analytics out. So let's be very, very careful of what goes in whatever tech that we are implementing in our own units. But with that tactical thing out of the way, I would really say two things. Analytics also helps us ask powerful questions. So what we ask is important because analytics gives us insights linked to what we ask. That's one. And the yin yang of it is basis the insights we get out of all that analytics, our ability to ask more meaningful questions so that we can make the big impact kind of comes out. Sorry if this sounds a little circular, but that is what it is. Because if you ask the right questions, then you're analyzing for the right things. And as you analyze, I think it's super important not to be in denial of what that data throws out. It's important to then go deeper to say, did we feed in wrong data, firstly? Or is the data throwing up something that our inherent biases never allowed us to see? And that's really the power that, all of data and the layered insights that come from it bring out.
If it's okay with you, I'm going to add on. I'm just going to summarize this whole thing. So one is data. From data flows information. From information flows insight. And from insight flows action. The last one is important. And Maha, you spoke very well of. Get the right hypothesis, get the right data in, and then get to all this right up to the action stage. When we get to the action stage, do we have the courage to take that action? That's a very important one. Let me give you one example. Suppose your data tells you that your gender pay parity is not where it should be. So will you stand up and take action? And will you be able to go up and say openly, well, these are the places where we have erred, either in our promotions or either. So it requires, at one end, beyond all of the analytics, what do you do with ultimately what Gangapriya said, what actions will you take? Right? Asking the right questions. What Ashok said, what is the process that you will follow? So I know we must be really, really hard on time. Dave, any last question for the day?
Can we hear the last question?
All right, one last question. Just let me see. Okay. What makes the HR guys to compromise with authenticity? Is it the business influences or is it fear of failure?
Sure.
It is a lack of courage and conviction themselves.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's right. I think adding to Nathan's point, I think it's quite often HR has to play a role which is beyond oneself.
Yeah.
And I think the company expects you to play a role as the guardian of authentic views. And therefore, we must therefore have the courage to sometimes take the different point of view, because that different point of view may be the start of a new journey for a lot of things in the company. Merely agreeing because it's convenient or the boss is saying so, it does a huge disservice to not only the organization or the function, but to ourselves as well. Because when you finish the conversation and leave the room, you've not been true to what you had to be. So for fear or favor, it makes no sense to simply agree. But in a acceptable manner, make your point held is actually the word called courage, or have the authenticity to make that difference. I think it goes back to what your intent is. If your intent is self-protection, you won't. If the intent is to make a difference, you will. And I think that's the nuance each of us have to draw a thin line on every day. Maha, Gangapriya, want to add on?
And if I may,
No, I would totally agree. I'll just stop at that. RBL calls it credible activist. We got to be the credible activists. Yeah.
So I'm going to share a story with all of you. Go ahead, Ganga.
Yeah, just add, I think we need to also be clear about our role as conscience keepers of the organization. We are in a sense the holders of the values, the culture. I mean, it's not to say that we have to be burdened by it, but it has to sort of sit lightly on our shoulders, and we should have the courage, like Ashok mentioned, to sort of reflect, show the mirror, so that people can sort of choose to take what decisions they want to take.
So I'm going to share a story with you. So please indulge me a couple of minutes there. So here was a case. This was at about 11 o'clock at night. People were on a conference call right across the globe. You had your CEO, CFO, you name it, right from the top honchos of the firm. And the topic was, there was a gentleman who was sent from India overseas to the US. First he was sent to Canada, and from Canada he went to the US. And the person contracted meningitis or brain fever. Brain fever is a difficult one because it's just downhill. And it's a very difficult thing for people to manage brain fever. The doctors in the US had given up, and they had suggested that he go into hospice, which is a nice word, a euphemism of saying, put him home and then he will try and pass away. And the other alternative that they had was, there was his wife from India saying, please send him to India. India has a lot more doctors who deal with meningitis. And I think there is an outer possibility that we could save him here in India. Now, a person who has meningitis will have to travel in an air ambulance, which means an air ambulance can be in the air for no more than 6 hours. And so you have to make multiple stops, and this person was in San Francisco. So you can imagine what it takes to come all the way across to India. Long story short, it was a long call. Almost 55, 58 minutes into the call, everybody was saying, it's an impossibility. I don't think the person can survive this long journey. There's only one thing that we can do. By the way, it's going to cost you more than $500,000. I mean, cost was one part, but there is no way the person can survive. Everybody was headed one way, and then suddenly a voice spoke up. The voice said, hey, if the person had stayed in India, the person would have been alive. No meningitis. The person went to Canada and the US and contracted this. This soldier followed the rightful instructions of the people who had called him into battle and ensured that he delivered on all the promise that he had to. And today, when that soldier is injured, we are talking about just letting him out in the cold. Ladies and gentlemen, on the call, let's bring the soldier home. Let's bring the soldier home. Now, I paused for effect, but that pause was for a very long time. And suddenly the CEO spoke up and said, hey, let's send the soldier home. Well, the soldier was sent home. Alok is very much alive. And he came and he spent a good time with his family. It took about 6-8 months for him to recover. I know this story as if it happened yesterday, because the voice that spoke up that day is speaking to all of you today. So on that note, Dave, thank you very much. Such a pleasure being with all of you.
Great.
Wow.
Excellent session, we don't have any word to say. So, Mr. Nathan, Gaganpriya, Mahalakshmi, Ashwin, thanks for such an enlightening session to all of us. And it has been a great, great session. I can see the comment, I can see the feedback. I would like to request Mr. Padman Pandey to extend the vote of thanks to all the speakers. Mr. Pandey, to you.
Yeah, good afternoon. It was an excellent learning session for all those who participated. Whenever we think about the key role of HR, I think our efforts always goes towards understanding the business strategy and then deploying talent to support it. But in today's session, I think we got some, the speaker shared some very important additional points, which I think will be help HR to be a more trusted partner in building an agile and risk-ready organization. I was listening to the first speaker who talked about the larger risk. When we talk about risk in the organization, he talked about the mental health, the stress, the depression. And this is a time when we say that we have moved from work-life balance to work-life integration. And in this change scenario, as said by him, by Captain Raghuram, that we need to relook in our expectation from employees. And two things which I noted from his session was that be smart but don't lose your heart. Very important. And also that leaders' job is to deviate from SOPs. We need a motivation in the organization which is driven by leaders. Leaders has to empower people. Leaders has to take care of aspiration of employees. Maharaj, Lakshmi, you, I think it was, I always remember that companies do not achieve agility with push of a button. And I think there where you talked about agile growth culture and putting efforts to get that in through, whether it was through empathy, customer insight, or through responding to failures, learning from failures. That was fantastic. Kanupriya, your experience, I think, as you said, rightly said, that we need to be the cultural architect. We need to have change management skills inbuilt in HR. But rightly said, in this point of technology, where technology is in every aspect, I think data analytics, data-driven decisions, and even capturing the voice of employees through help of technology becomes very important. We got Ashokji a little late, but yes, he talked a very valid point when he talked about understanding the business drivers. I think without understanding, you can't do anything. And role of technology in understanding not only the skill set required, but also reskilling people towards that. That was, and the deferred accountability, that phrase, I think that puts a very important point in our mind as HR professionals, that how we need to create our future path, and everybody will learn that how to create that accountability in not only in hiring, each and every action which we take in our department. And Mr. Nathan, I think excellent moderation. You are best in getting best out of the speakers. That was excellent. Your rapid fire round, I think I loved that most. And thank you very much, all the speakers. I take this opportunity to convey a sincere thanks to all for your valuable time and valuable inputs. And also thanks to all participants. I think we after some technology problems, this session went smooth, and this session will be remembered by all participants. There are 279 people still hearing to us. Thanks to all, and I hope that all will be benefited by the learnings from this awesome session. Thank you very much. Thank